So we've recently issued a report, From Good to Growth, and why institutionalizing hedge funds creates value for owners and investors. So maybe, Mike, I'll start with you. When we talk about institutionalization, what do we mean by that? It's a term that's been coined, but what do we really mean?
Sure. I think people are using institutionalization to capture a lot of change that's taking place within asset managers today. It encompasses the desire to be scalable, for firms to be sustainable, to frankly be economically viable. Institutionalization is a term that's simply dealing with handling all that in a predictable, repeatable way.
Maybe, Bhushan, when we talk about the functions within a hedge fund that we would be institutionalizing, what functions are they?
So as Mike said, when we think about institutionalization, it's all about how do you scale that particular firm. And then when we think about it, and we noted in our paper, one of the first things you've got to do is actually assess the different functions. They could be front, they could be middle, they could be back office. So if we take one of those functions like human resources, that's one that we see a number of firms looking at as a candidate for institutionalization. Succession planning in this industry is critical. A number of these firms have grown up with founder-led cultures, principals that are either looking to move on or looking to promote a different level of management. So we see things such as the talent management process around succession planning and around how you manage performance in this environment, in this very transparent environment, as being critical to an example of a function that could be institutionalized.
I mean, Gary, maybe I'll add this, because people use the word institutionalization, as I said, to capture a lot of things, but oftentimes it actually has a negative connotation for people in the industry. Yeah. And one of the things that people in the industry hold near and dear to their hearts is being entrepreneurial.
Sure.
And so on its face, it would sometimes appear that being entrepreneurial and being nimble is inconsistent with being of institutional quality. And actually, we don't think that's the case. We think that, frankly, firms need to be nimble and entrepreneurial on the front end of their business, certainly, but to be institutional quality and predictable and scalable on the back end of the business, the middle and back office side.
And expectations have certainly changed. The expectations of investors, of the regulators, of consultants, whomever it is that are working with them to place assets certainly have changed. With all that's going on, and maybe Melanie comment on this a little bit, how do you prioritize? I mean, obviously the cost of an organization is very important in terms of, driving returns. So prioritization and the impact on cost.
Absolutely. I think a lot of it's been reactive at times, because obviously when regulators come in and ask firms to do something, that's the first place they're going to actually focus. So a lot of the changes in regulation these days have caused firms to really focus on changing processes like compliance and others that relate to that, but probably really taking a step back and looking across the organization at the different business units, how they interact with one another, streamlining, as Mike, institutionalizing some of that, so that you have synergies across, whether it's control functions, technology across the organization, really is one way to keep your costs down, coupled with looking out at what are your service providers, whether it's an administrator, and how do you better leverage the administrator when you're trying to meet regulatory requirements, as well as just streamlining your business.
I think it's a really good question, Gary, because with all the change that's been put on the industry, regulatory change, tax change, investor pressure, market pressures, frankly, managers are really just focusing on what's right in front of them.
Yeah.
And, I use the term just in time to describe the attitude that they have, and long-term planning has been a luxury for many managers, but it is necessary to both deal with the current challenges, but also to plan ahead.
So when we think about how to institutionalize on that point, it's about how to prioritize. Is about what's the business case. So you look at the different functions. Not each function will need institutionalization, and what we mean by that is coming up with standardized processes, appropriate tools and technologies, moving from very manual intensive to automating some of that work. They may not need an upgrade or a different kind of talent, but putting that business case to say how does this drive the returns? How does this drive what I need from my investors? Is this going to help me with transparency for regulators? That's the piece, and when we look at that, you can make really focused decisions around which functions do you choose. We'll never be in a case where it's going to be all functions. There are going to be choices that the firms are going to have to make.